Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, Katrina Murphy of the Irish Farmers Journal here. On Wednesday this week, the results of the Teagasc National Farm Survey were released. Dairy and tillage farmers recorded double-digit drops in income, with average farm income also down 9%. My colleague Amy Ford talked to Dr. Emma Dillon of Teagasc about the findings. We also talked to Brian Moran from Teagasc about on-farm investment last year, which fell by nearly 100 million to 690 million.
Team lead on the Teagasc National Farm Survey, Brian Moran. Brian, this year's survey shows that investments on farm are down on the year previous, yet borrowings are up. Could you talk us through what's going on farm at the moment?
Yeah, no problem. Listen, what we see happening in 2016 is that investment by farmers was made in the region of 690 million euros, so still a very significant level. So it's down alright by 13%, but it's very specific to the type of investment the farmers will be making. Machinery investment is pretty much unchanged. So farmers invested in the region of 430 million in 2016 on machinery. That's much the same as they did in 2015. Where the big change has happened is in relation to buildings. So buildings investment is down this year. The farmers that invest most in buildings are dairy farmers, and dairy farmers' incomes are the most severely affected farms in 2016, and as a result you'd expect their investment levels to be down. So their investment is down by about 20%, but they're still the most significant investors. Okay, on average, every dairy farmer last year invested 15,700 euros in their farm business. So while we're seeing a decrease in farm investment, we think there's reasons behind it. The increase in borrowings is small, up 3%. The reason for that, you would imagine, on a lower income year, farmers perhaps might not have been able to make the same level of capital repayments. But farm borrowings are very low in a European context. Average farm borrowings are only 22,000 euros per farm. Okay, what we spoke about today was the fact that a lot of farms have no debt. So over 2/3 of farms have no debt whatsoever. And when we adjust for that, you see an increase, to about 58,000 euros per farm. So there are farmers that have debt. That varies by system. Dairy farmers tend to have the highest levels of debt. On average, for dairy farmers that have debt, the average debt level is 100,000 euros. So I would think it's an issue farmers have to be aware of, but in a European context, it's not. Irish debt levels are quite low compared to European colleagues.
And just on our lower farm debt levels, you mentioned in the dairy sector debt per cow specifically. Could you just expand a bit on that?
Yeah, so when we look at average dairy debt, we showed there today that it's just under 60,000 euros. The average cow number is about 72, so it works out at 853 euros per cow is the average debt. We were shown that farmers that had expanded their production in excess of 30% had generally higher debt levels than the other farmers. Farms that had expanded most had debt levels in the region of 1,100 euros per cow. Okay, if you compare those to their European colleagues, the Teagasc National Farm Survey is a member of the Farm Accountancy Network in the EU, so it allows us to compare our cost of production and our loan per cow ratio across the EU 27. We would see that average debt level across the EU is over 3,000 euros. Now that's 2012 data, but it won't have changed much in the current year. So whilst those farmers that have expanded have higher debt levels than those who don't, in a European context, it's still quite low.
And finally, direct payments in the dry stock sector, farmers in that sector are quite dependent on them. What's going on there? Yeah,
so basically what we would see this year is that across the dry stock sectors, which would be the cattle rearing, say suckler farmers, cattle finishing farms and the sheep farms, we would see that they are eating into their direct payments to fund production. Okay, so on the cattle rearing farms, the average income is just over 13,000 euros, whereas the direct payments they received were 14,500 euros. So they're using the direct payments to fund production. Direct payments are slightly positive on the cattle finishing system, but only in the margin of like 100 or 200 euros, and they're negative as well as on the sheep farm. So those farms are hugely reliant on direct payments. and more reliant on the Pillar 2 type payments that you would see in relation to GLAS and BGGP. Okay, so those payments are much more important. Obviously, the single farm payment is still the most important payment on all farms. But if you look across the farm system, the Pillar 2 type payments that have been brought in on the last couple of years on the environmental side and on the animal welfare side are hugely significant for the dry stock sector.
Dr. Emma Dillon, Research Officer with Teagasc at the 2016 National Farm Survey. Emma, incomes are down in general across the farm sectors. How is it looking in a sectoral breakdown?
Okay. So in terms of income across systems, the fall in milk price and lower crop yields led to an average fall of 9% across all farm systems. That came in at €24,000. In terms of the individual systems, dairy was down 17%, coming in at about 52,000. The dry stock farms ranged between 13,000 and 16,000, up 2 and 3 on the cattle rearing and cattle other, and down 1 on sheep farms. Tillage was down 10% due to lower crop yields and a reduced price, and the average farm income on those farms was about €30,000.
The viability of Irish farms, there's a lot of reliance there on direct payments. How is that looking in this year's National Survey?
Yeah. Well, you could see from the cattle rearing and cattle other farms that the increase in direct payments on those farms between 5 and 11% insulated them from the fall in cattle prices and maintained their income, where they actually increased marginally by 2 and 3% respectively. So they're a very important component on those farms. And particularly on the cattle rearing farms, you could see an increase in the BDGP payment. Also, there was some retention of the basic payment scheme last year, and so that increased across those farms, as did the rollout of GLAS.
And the outlook for next year, how is it looking for farm incomes?
For next year, dairy farms, it looks quite positive. Depending, there are issues there in terms of costs and labour issues. However, the milk price looks quite good, and production year on year has increased. In terms of tillage farms, the outlook is maybe more negative in terms of issues there around yield and global stocks. Cattle rearing, cattle other and sheep farms, we would expect them to be somewhat more stable.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Meanwhile, the Fine Gael leadership contest has nearly reached an end. Leo Varadkar took a moment out from his whirlwind campaign to chat to the Farmers Journal about his choice for Minister for Agriculture and Ireland's climate change targets.
Climate change, we've a lot of targets set, the likes of Foodwise and Food Harvest. Do you endorse feeding 50 million people with less resources in a more sustainable way and meeting our targets? How do you kind of square that?
Yeah, well, I think it's difficult to square our ambitions in agriculture and in Foodwise with our climate change commitments. But we do need to feed the world. Quite frankly, the world needs to be fed, and there's increased demand for the food that we produce. And if we don't produce it in Ireland, it'll be produced somewhere else, which will therefore cause climate change. In less sustainable countries, it'll probably cause more climate change. So I think we should stick to our targets for food production, and the focus in terms of getting our emissions down should be from the other areas, which is particularly energy and transport. And we can do that. We can do it with renewable energy. We have guaranteed prices, and what you need to get renewable energy going is you need price supports, not so much kind of minimum price. Basically, it's called a refit. We only have that at the moment really for onshore wind. We don't have offshore wind, don't really have it for solar. So I think we can do a lot more on energy to bring down our emissions, and on transport, even things that other countries have done that we're way behind on, like moving towards alternative fuels and electric fuels, or electricity for our buses. To a certain extent, our train system where it's viable, and vehicles. So I think the focus should be on trying to meet our targets really from transport and energy rather than from agriculture, which I think is going to be difficult to achieve.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
A 32-county charity silage event kicked off on Monday this week. It aims to bale silage in every county of Ireland in less than 6 days. Barry Cassidy talked to Gareth Galt from Grassmen, who's lending a hand to the charity event.
Barry Cassidy here from the Irish Farmers Journal. I'm here with Garrett from Grassmen and Floyd from the 32 Bale Challenge. Garrett, can you tell me how you got involved?
Oh, it's very simple. We've met these guys a couple of years back through tractor runs and working together a wee bit, and these guys had a radical idea of doing something different, and as soon as they sort of brought up the idea of a challenge, well, that's Grassmen wrote all over it. And the fact that it's involving grass, yeah, what kind of works, doesn't it? So that's how we got involved. But long story short, behind the fact that with 4 different products of balers and different tractors they have a bit of a mess with, we're trying to get the message out there for very worthwhile charities, and that is key behind it all. But if we can do that, having fun, life doesn't get any better.
And Floyd, tell me, what exactly is the aim of the challenge?
The aim is actually to raise awareness for the 2 charities that we're doing this for, Ronald McDonald and Daisy Hill Lodge, and basically show off machinery and bale 100 bales in each county and raise the money for the 2 charities.
Brilliant. And tell me, so far this year, how's the silage season been going?
Silage season for me hasn't kicked off, but it did start early with the good weather. But stuff was put in and done and dusted, but weather has held it up again. And
the Irish Farmers Journal reported last week that there was trouble for contractors getting labour. How have you found that? Or?
Well, for me, let's say I work alone as much as possible and get help from family, but it is, talking to other guys, it is hard to get employees to work.
Well, lads, thanks very much for that, and best of luck with the rest of the challenge.
Thanks very much for taking the time and chatting to us.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
The summer is a busy time for machinery on farms. I asked Garda Inspector Eddie Golden about the rules on tractors and road safety issues at a demonstration organised by the IFA in County Tipperary. Eddie, can you tell us what farmers are, what are the main problems that you come across with agricultural machinery on the road?
Well, this time of year now, Katrina, obviously a lot of farm machinery moving around. What we're trying to do this evening is just to, point out the main features that we find on vehicles that are giving us difficulty. You know, the main features that we find is that the beacon is not working, not serviceable. Any vehicle over 1980, since 1980 onwards, should have a beacon flashing. And the reason for that is to show that it is a slow-moving vehicle. Now, the members of the public should also be reacting correctly to that and slowing down accordingly. But again, it's just to get into that mindset that, if you've gone under the shed and it has been pushed down or out of the way, or it's not working, it should be serviceable. The second point to make is that all lights on the vehicle should be working day or night as well, and I don't think a lot of people have realised that we can test during the daytime. If we stop a tractor, we can test to make sure all the lights are working during the daytime as well as the night. And I think that farmers really need to get into the habit of doing some sort of an inspection on their equipment more regularly than what they had been before. And I think it's really good practice now to start looking at your vehicles before you bring them out on the road on a daily to weekly basis to see are all the lights working. Because of the nature of farming as well, it is quite difficult to keep. Bulbs can blow very easily. You get caught in bushes, you get caught in trees, whatever it might be. But again, if that happens, check out the vehicle, make sure things are working. It's far easier to replace the bulb than obviously to come in conflict with somebody on the roads. What we're trying to do as well is to point out that the new trailer regulations, which have been in place now since the 1st of the 1st, 2016, and we're in enforcement phase now of this, and this is probably one of the last evenings we're going to be doing around Tipperary anyway in relation to this, that we want to try and make sure that farmers know the regulations, know that if they apply to themselves, and really what it's about doing is assessing your needs. Have you a tractor that's designed to tow a certain weight? Have you looked at the weight plate on that tractor, the braking capacity of the tractor? What type of trailer are you pulling? Have you looked at the weight plate on the trailer? Have you looked at the trailer to see are the lights serviceable on the rear of it? Have you looked at is there proper reflective pieces of strips on the trailers themselves as well? And looking at some of the older machinery, is it time that you park that trailer up now and just give it its just reward after probably being put together many years ago? We all know the trailers that were welded together or put together with truck axles and all those. Those were manufactured in a time when there wasn't as much regulation in place. They were designed to do a job, which they did, fair enough. But now we're into a more modern era. We have to conform with the road legislation, the health and safety legislation, and we also want people to be safe on the roads and ultimately the whole idea of these evenings and evenings like this is to promote road safety for the farmers as well as for the members of the public. And we all have to work together on the roads, particularly in the roads of Tipperary. I'm always an advocate for safety and for sharing the road together. I want members of the public to, when they see the increase in farm machinery now around this time of the year with the silage season, coming into harvest season as well, you'll have far bigger vehicles on the roads. They need to react correctly to that, to slow down, give everybody a bit of space, react to the beacons when they see them flashing. That is a slow-moving vehicle. Also as well for motorists to think about, this vehicle ahead of me, is it going to turn left or right? Is there signs on the road to say that the vehicle may have turned already or is going to go into a field? There's always signs when you look back at a collision when it happens. There was probably certain identifiable hazards that would have, if you had looked at them correctly, you could have adjusted your speed and probably not get into conflict with a tractor either turning left or right. A lot of the collisions are happening that way. People go for overtakes on vehicles which are turning. Also for the farmers as well, to make sure that their mirrors are outside the range of the trailer, that they can see back, and to be able to, if it's appropriate, to pull in and let traffic off. But again, for motorists to exercise restraint and hold back when necessary to make sure that they're not getting in conflict with each other. And we have to share the road. The few minutes it takes just for a little bit of patience is very important. What I have said to farmers as well though, and even this evening I made the point, if you don't pull in and give people right away, they will get frustrated and they will try then to maybe overtake in places which are not appropriate. So you're actually adding to the problem as opposed to helping it. So always be mindful of where you could pull in to let people off, and for members of the public then just to hold back when necessary, and make sure everybody's safe.
And that's mainly, I suppose, in relation to the heavier vehicles, but we were talking also today about jeeps, vans pulling the trailers. So, for instance, a man bringing a cow to the mart, those regulations are in now as well in terms of having the EB licence. Is that being, are farmers taking out those licences? Is there enough of compliance with that side of things?
Well, I think a lot of people are worried about this and concerned about this, and the first thing they should do is actually look at their licence themselves and see, because a lot of people are actually covered, and I know myself from even talking to a few farmers here today, when I actually looked at their licence, they were covered and they didn't realise they were. So look, that's a simple thing that can be done. But once you have an E plus B on your licence, or BE, that allows you to carry something between 3,500 kg and 7,000 kg. Your normal B licence is only designed for a two-wheel trailer, probably up to 3,500 kg maximum permissible weight. But
and just put that into a picture, if you don't mind. You mentioned inside a trailer carrying just a couple of bags of coal would be enough to go over that weight.
Absolutely, yeah. Normally speaking, the B licence was designed for people who would go to the dump or would go in and to the town just to collect a small 6x4 car trailer, two wheels on it, really designed for light work. Once you go into the heavier capacity, two-wheel trailers, triple axle trailers, horse boxes, cattle boxes, all those type of areas will need a more substantial vehicle to pull them. But again, you have to know the permissible weight of the trailer as well as the Jeep themselves, and those permissible weights are on the plate on the vehicle. Now, it can be a car, it could be a light van, it could be a Jeep. A lot of farmers are using combinations of those vehicles doing their daily duties. But at this stage, what we would say is that the licensing is one aspect to it. Then we move on to the permissible weights that's allowable for vehicles. And that is quite technical. But again, if you're towing a trailer which is overweight for the type of vehicle you're using, you're probably putting yourself at risk, because your braking efficiency is not going to be the same. You won't be able to stop in time. Plus, you're putting extra strain on the suspensions of the vehicle as well as the trailer that were not designed for that. So again, it's important. And we've had people here now who are a bit kind of shocked this evening going home, thinking that they have bought a fine big cattle box, and when they've looked at their weight of the towing vehicle itself, it's really restricting them probably less than 1,000 kgs that they can carry in that new box. So sometimes people will have to think before they buy. Sometimes the two-wheeled box might be better than the three-wheel box. Sometimes the vehicle that they're driving could be a soft off-roader or something that's not really designed to carry the heavier weights permissible. So again, these are all the learning that we're trying to get through to farmers here tonight.
And final question, I suppose these rules have been in since the 1st of January last year, 2016. Is the enforcement going to get stricter now from the Gardaí's point of view?
Yeah, well, I think, look, we've been very fair with these regulations to date. We have had a number of people who have obviously come in conflict with us who haven't conformed at all in relation to trailers, tractors and otherwise. But, from the general consensus tonight, just for members of the public's information, we are in an enforcement phase. We have been since the 1st of 1/16. You will find yourself in contravention of these regulations now. You will find yourself in front of the court. And I suppose ultimately what we're trying to do as well is prevent farmers coming in conflict with situations whereby somebody has either a serious collision and through probably neglect or probably oversight. It's not oversight anymore, it's neglect really we're coming at, that they should have known. There's no, ignorance is not an excuse in these situations. So we're asking people just to do the right thing. Think about what they need to do. Think about the types of vehicles they're driving. All the information's in the booklets. And we're here to assist as well. And look, at any stage, we will try and help people to conform as best as possible.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Jack Kennedy recently attended the Dairy Industry Newsletter Conference in London, where he spoke with Nick Whelan, CEO of Dale Farm in Belfast, Aaron Ford, Chief Executive of Arrivo and Chairman of Ornua, and Rabobank's Kevin Bellamy.
I'm here with Nick Whelan, Group CEO at Dale Farm Limited. Nick, we're over here in the UK listening to predictions on milk price and thoughts on Brexit. In terms of Dale Farm, where do you see milk prices in the next 3 to 6 months? And 2, how will the challenges Brexit presents impact on Dale Farm?
Well, I suppose as was covered today, trying to predict milk prices in an extremely volatile market is a skill set that I haven't acquired yet, to be honest with you, Jack, in the dairy market. So 6 months is probably a stretch for anybody to forecast, and I haven't met the company or man yet who can do it accurately. But one would be optimistic, to be frank. I think markets are quite buoyant at the moment. The troubling thing with it, again, to be very honest, is that not a lot of commentators or participants would have seen this coming. Not a lot, in truth, understand it. We're good at retrospectively understanding what's happening, but actually reading what's happening in front of us 6 to 8 weeks ahead is proving very challenging at the moment. I suppose retrospectively looking at it, we have quite a buoyant commodity market at the moment. It's not built off demand fundamentals per se. It's more of a supply-driven correction. And a lot of the escalated prices that we're seeing in the spot market haven't hit retail shelves yet, or haven't hit the consumer as such, so we haven't seen the effect of high prices, which always leads to reduced demand. But one would be optimistic, and I've said it myself to my own farmers, that for the next 2 to 3 months, I think we'll have stability at least in milk pricing in Northern Ireland.
There was a lot of talk today about the butter revolution and the prices that butter. I mean, we're seeing prices of butter now that we've never probably seen, in a long time. Are Dale Farm able to capitalise on that piece, or where does Dale Farm in terms of, I know the protein piece, how does that fit in terms of the basket for Dale Farm at the moment?
I know it's very good for us, and to be honest with you, in that we are selling butter into the marketplace. We're doing it carefully at the moment. We're selling it in small lots into a rising market. So that's very helpful. It's also helping the cheese dynamic, there's no doubt about that. And we see cheese markets in Europe and in the UK stabilising and strengthening, which is good news.
Okay, you mentioned cheese. I mean, 60% of the cheese produced in Ireland comes across here to the UK. I talked about the challenge that Brexit presents. In terms of Dale Farm, what does the Brexit, is it a challenge, is it an opportunity, or how do you see Brexit? As much as we know about Brexit today, how do you see it impacting on Dale Farm?
Well, obviously we're still in the realm of speculation because we don't know what Brexit is or will be. I'm quite neutral, to be very frank on it. I've gone on record as saying that from the outside, Dale Farm appears to be Brexit proof, and that all our milk is red tractor and in the UK. Our 10 factories are in the UK, and 85% of our customers are in the UK, and our farmers are very supportive of it. So yes, that looks very positive. What I do have a concern around is a cheap food policy here in the UK, which was covered here. James Neville today clearly covered off one scenario there, which would be quite troubling, whereby we could have a restriction on where we export, and we could have our markets opening up here in the UK. That's a worst case scenario, obviously. And another very significant fact for us is the single farm payments, which could be anywhere between 2p and 5p, and where we get the 5p is if it affects beef overall and land prices. We've calculated that it could be, now that's the worst case scenario, up to 5p of a differential on today. And if that is a competitive disadvantage, that could lead to significant issues for our farmers. So there's real opportunities. there's real threats. We're quite balanced on the whole scenario at the moment.
Nick, thank you very much. I'm here with Aaron Ford, Chairman of Arnua and CEO of Arrivo in Ireland. Aaron is presenting here at the Dairy Industry Newsletter Conference in London. Aaron, we're over here in the UK where 26% of our Arnua sales happen, and I suppose over 60% of our cheddar is sold. But you also made the point in your presentation, of course, that Arnua or Ireland is a big buyer of British cheese. The key question is, how are Arnua dealing with some of these challenges in light of the Brexit challenge that's coming down the line?
So for some time since prior to the abolition of quotas, Arnua has been on a journey of growth, a journey of market diversification, of upping its game on innovation, of upping its game on scale and in-market expansion. What Brexit will do for us will merely be to accelerate some of those actions. We've invested 250 million over the last 4 or 5 years in that area. We'll invest the same again to 2021. We are committed strongly to the British market here. It has been a good market for many, many decades for Irish dairy. And we see that continuing through our Pilgrim's Choice brand and our ingredient business across 5 operating sites here in the UK. So we are strongly committed to the market here, but our job is to manage any downside from a harder Brexit that might arise. So we will continue our journey of market diversification, of innovation, of in-market expansion to protect Arnua and Irish dairy farmers from the worst effects of a hard Brexit.
Okay, I mean, maybe that's the Brexit piece covered off. There was some talk today of milk prices and maybe that there may be a kind of a stabilisation at least, and maybe slightly positive for 2018, given the butter revolution that's happening around the world, and that the butter is kind of maybe going to float a lot more boats going forward. I mean, are you a little bit more optimistic on milk price, or where would your thoughts be on milk price at the moment, I suppose, for the next couple of months and maybe for the next year?
So a number of weeks ago, I suppose I would have been less optimistic on milk price based on the protein fraction of milk. You're correct on butter. Butter has performed extraordinarily well, and we're seeing world record prices for butter in recent weeks. That is, the price of milk effectively has been held back though by a poor performance on the protein side, due in the main to fairly strong milk flows globally and an overhang of supply in public stocks in the US and in intervention stocks within the EU. However, the demand piece has held up fairly well. Demand is difficult to gauge at a point in time and can only be measured looking back. But to the extent we understand current demand, I think we can be optimistic for the balance of the year that milk prices will hold at around the low 30-cent mark for Irish milk.
Okay, thank you very much, Aaron.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm here with Kevin Bellamy, Global Head of Dairy with Rabobank. Kevin has just presented at the Dairy Industry Conference here in London. I'm going to ask him a couple of questions in terms of some of the thoughts that he presented at his presentation. Kevin, you talked about China and imports maybe balancing out and potentially, I suppose, a continuing upwards trend of 2 to 2.5% growth year on year up to maybe even 2020. And you also talked about maybe more health and wellness products going into the Chinese market. Some would have expected maybe a higher pace of growth and the fact that the two-child policy might actually drive growth higher. You're probably not painting a very, very positive picture, but it's still good on China.
I think we talk about the new norm on China. I think we talk about Chinese demand balancing, but certainly it's come down from the heady years of the early 2000s when you get a much bigger growth. But overall, the demographics in China are changing. It's getting an older population. China is probably the least fertile country on earth nowadays. Now, if it come out of 35 years of restrictions of the number of children they can have, the population is getting older, so you might expect a more balanced growth in the market in future, but we still see it growing. And as their wealth grows, we see the Chinese consumer getting more discerning of what they're eating. Health and wellness is certainly growing faster than some more basic products now, so you see premiumization and value in that market has become a very important thing. So similar to Western dairy companies, Chinese companies are seeking value rather than volume.
Kevin, from your presentation, I got a better sense that maybe Southeast Asia, particularly maybe Indonesia, is showing better potential than maybe even China. Is that right? And is it difficult to do business in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think you're right. I think see a lot of countries that are beginning to hedge their Chinese strategy by trying to get into Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is certainly rapid growing. They have a rapid growing population. They've got some good GDP growth growing, so the economies are getting better. And I think there's a lot of interest in getting into dairy, where dairy consumption is growing pretty rapidly in Southeast Asia. Is it easy to get there? Well, there are some difficulties. The local companies that people like Fraser and Neve, some of the Ultra, some of the Vina Milk types of companies have got a strong local base. They've got some strong regional brands. They're interested in within region exports. So you see that the local players are difficult to compete with. You also see the multinationals there. Fonterra has a big base in Malaysia. You've got Friesen Campina and Arla both have big research bases out there. So I think the multinationals have already been there. So depending on whether you're already there, new players will find it difficult to get in because the competition is quite high, but it's a very interesting region to get into.
Kevin, again, we heard a lot of discussion about butter and how that it's driving milk price markets all around the world, really. I mean, there was a suggestion that it could even get higher and that it could, a butter increase could even drive higher prices later on in the year. What do you see as the biggest threat to this butter milk price inflation, I'll call it? I mean, is it politics? Is it intervention stocks? Or what do you see might pull the market back in terms of this kind of butter price driven increase that's happening at the moment?
Well, certainly butter's supporting the market at the moment. You're seeing very high stocks of protein. You're seeing problems of protein between the Canadians and the Americans at the moment. It's all about having too much protein on the market, but butter's supporting the price. We've seen record butter prices. You also see very steep demand for demand decline for products like margarine. So everyone's going for natural, everyone's going for butter type products or butter containing products, and that's driving demand for butter. What do I think is the threat to the market? I think it's probably around where production goes from here. We've had a lot of fears in the market about European production taking off like a tidal wave. We haven't seen that yet. European production certainly going up, but not to the extent that some people feared. I think the next key point is what happens in New Zealand. If you look at Fonterra coming in with a price above the 620 level, then I think you get a very strong start to the season in New Zealand, weather permitting, and that may put a bit of downward pressure on price. But at the moment, we're predicting prices remain relatively stable.
A number of speakers again talked about, maybe the once intervention stocks were used up, be it in China or in the US, that you could actually see milk prices going higher in 2018. Would you subscribe to that, or as you say, is it dependent on the supply that comes from New Zealand when the new season starts in July and August?
Well, we've seen European production recovering. We've seen strong production coming out of the States. We might get a strong response to a higher price in New Zealand. Admittedly, Australia's still pretty damaged stock from the events there last year. You see Brazil beginning to come back into the market there. They've had a pretty difficult couple of years, but they're beginning to balance the market, probably balance it this year and get a bit of growth next year. Argentina, we think, will stay declining. So it's all around that balance of supply and demand, and certainly that supply is creeping up. So I hear what you say about prices going up in 2018, but it depends on what the supply response from farmers is over the next year.
Kevin, thanks very much. We'll see what happens.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
And finally, in this week's Irish Country Living, we have the 2017 FBD Insurance Farmyard of the Year Awards. Editor Mairead Lavery explains what's involved in the competition.
And now that the silage is getting made and the cows have all been milked and the calving is done, it's time to look around the yard. And what's more, you've probably got a bunch of teenagers who've left school. They're sitting at home and they're getting up late and they're saying they're bored. And that's not a word you should ever hear around a farmyard, because there's plenty of work to be done. And get them out with the paintbrush, get them out with the shovel, and to clean the place up and tidy the place up and be ready to enter the Farmyard Awards, because it's very much a family thing and it's very much an intergenerational family thing.
So what kind of farms have entered the awards previously?
Really good ones. We've had fantastic winners over the years. And, we present the prizes at the ploughing on the Tuesday every year. And it is just wonderful to see so many times it's 3 generations of a family that's there. It's the work started by one, continued by the next generation, and the 3rd generation getting involved too. So they're very much family businesses and family affairs that we're talking about. Last year's winners were the Lynch family from County Cavan, Lochduff, and I was up with Eddie and Zara and their 3 little children there last week when we were launching the FBD Insurance National Farmyard Awards, and the place was just fantastic. And the ag sector, we're only as strong as our weakest link, and these are the farms where you'd be very proud to bring any consumer, any food processor, any retailer in to visit to show the standard that we have. And and that's what we're promoting, and it's right across all the different ag sectors. So dairying has won it the vast majority of years, but we also have tillage farmers enters, dry stock, suckler farmers, mushroom farmers, pig farmers, sheep farmers, right across the board. And in this year, we're back to doing it regionally. So there'll be a prize for each of the regions, each of the provinces, the 4 provinces, and a runner-up prize. And the prize is actually significant. The regional winner will get 2,000, the runner-up will get 1,000, and then there'll be an overall prize of €5,000. Now that'll buy you a lot of paint and sweeping brushes.
Yeah.
And on the whole, that's what you're looking for here.
Yeah.
We're not looking for high-tech farmyards. We're not looking for really modern farmyards. We're looking for tidy farmyards, and above all, farmyards that are safe to work in, that are really a safe place for everybody. And no more now than when you get out of bed in the morning and you leave the old bed there and the room all messed up, and you come back to it in the evening. It's not very nice.
No.
So likewise on a farmyard, it's so much nicer to have everything, and so much safer to have everything tidy and have a place for everything and everything in its place.
Yeah. Well, the prize fund is very impressive anyway. It might even take them on a holiday if they so wish.
Yeah, well, look at it's a very nice prize fund, and we will also have a prize of 2 special awards for the farm safety champion, someone that's gone beyond the beyonds when it comes to safety, and also for the best new entrant. We'd like to encourage extra people to come in, and they may not be at a standard where they would be winning a regional prize or whatever yet, but they are entering. They can show us the kind of progress they've made. So the best new entrant is another category that is new to the competition.
Great. It was great to encourage that as well, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah. And because in many of the cases now over the years, people who have gone on, or farmers' families who have gone on to win the main prize, have actually entered and maybe not even got a regional prize or a regional runner-up. But what they've done is they have taken the advice of the judges and they've addressed the issues, and they've gradually come up the scene until they've won the award. So we don't stop people who, are runners-up or regional winners coming back in. The only people who can't come back in to enter any for a second time are the national winners. Just in terms of what the judges will be looking out for, the farmyard design is something that's important to them. The farmyard appearance and how tidy it is and how it's well maintained. Health and safety is huge, and then landscaping and sheltering and biodiversity around the farmyard. That's taken account of too. So we're not saying leave all the nettles there and all of that, but at least something like nettles, they provide biodiversity, and they're a great home to the butterflies.
Yeah.
So it's to just have that awareness as well, and to provide us then with photographs of each of the areas and 200 words outlining why this farm deserves an award and why it's been entered.
Great. Well, you have some job judging all these entries, I imagine.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not mine, thanks be to God. But what we do is the judges are from FBD Insurance, from Teagasc, and from Country Living in the shape of Catherine O'Leary. And we will shortlist, and they will go out and visit each of the farms that are shortlisted, and then the prizes will be presented at the ploughing on the Tuesday evening. So, you know, everybody from the island of Ireland who's farming is eligible to apply. And it's not just that the farmer can apply. If somebody thinks that Joe down the road and Joe and Mary down the road have a really well kept farm and they admire it, let them, they can nominate the people. Mm-hmm. They can also be nominated via their local Teagasc office or their local FBD insurance office. So, like, there's plenty of ways to enter the competition. And, you know, every year you think you're not going to find the same standard, and every year they're there. And it's wonderful to see them coming forward.
Great, well, thanks so much, Mairead. And you can read more about that in this week's Country Living.
That's right, absolutely.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.